Hello everybody, thanks for coming along to this session on plastics. So first up we've got Danial Gallagher, CEO of iQRenew. He's going to be presenting on a solution to the soft plastics crisis in Australia. Very ambitious, so we'll look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thanks Danny.
Good morning everyone. If you could press play on the slide, would be good, thank you. Just pause it there, please. Well, thanks everyone for joining us this morning. I would like to also thank the team iQRenew who last night were the Thunderbirds and returned to their normal role as contributing team members to playing an impactful role in trying to transform the waste of soft plastics into a recovered resource and eventually back into a product, because that's when true recycling happens, when we're actually making something from it. Over the last 3 to 5 years, iQRenew, and more specifically over the last 3 years, has been working very closely with lots of stakeholders in trying to identify where we can apply our skill set to try and play that role or have that missing link or fill that jigsaw puzzle. And we've been able to learn that it's very complex material, post-consumer soft plastics. It's made up of a range of different plastics, from bread bags to chip packets and milk bottles and all kinds of other products that the community want to have recycled. And in order to have markets for those products to be used by someone else, we need to be able to separate them at scale and at volume, which took us on a journey of coming up with a process called SPEC, or a play on words, initially called soft plastics engineered commodity. And that's the ability to be able to identify those commingled soft plastics and separate them into the polyethylenes and polypropylenes, so that we can actually have something that we can provide to an end user. End user being another learning that because it is so complex, it's hard to engage, or for manufacturers of plastics to take this material at volume while they were trialling. So by singulating that, we've been able to provide a cleaner stream for offtake partners to play around with, to develop products that hopefully the community and local government will be able to procure. If you could press play, please. So if you pause, so recycling starts and ends with us as the community, with the products that we buy, and then at the end of when we use those products, that packaging either going into a landfill bin or, as we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years, that social licence, people want to divert more from landfill and have something done with it. So we've an early adopter of a bag and a bin process to be able to leverage the community's yellow lidded bin at our materials recovery facility, which enables the community in the councils that service is operated to fill their soft plastic bag with soft plastics. It's tagged, so it starts a journey of being identified. It then gets picked up by the already in place existing infrastructure, your recycling truck, and gets taken to a material recovery facility where that bag is taken out. Now that's where, whether it was in a return to a store program or a collect from a house program or the bag and a bin program, that's where it fell over because there was an inability for users to be able to take that very complex material. Hence our jigsaw puzzle being SPEC that is able to, at scale, receive that bag and a bin material, that collected material from CRCs, from houses, and hopefully in the not too distant future, a return to store program. We can then sort it into individual polymer types and create a product that offtake partners, starting at the bottom right now, or not the other one, the next one up, aggregates into, say, asphalt. It's been used for quite some time. Moulding into fence posts, and garden sleepers. We'll see a video shortly around a real step forward in what the spec has actually been able to enable the recovery of PE to be able to then be mechanically sorted now, turned into a high-grade resin and then being used into filmmaking. And then over the horizon, it's slightly greyed out, and hopefully in the next couple of years we'll see some commercial productions of this in Australia, chemical recycling, because we decontaminate the material using this piece of infrastructure. We remove the chlorines that mechanical and chemical operators can't deal with, and we provide a really, really clean at-volume material that advanced and chemical recyclers will be able to then apply to their process. Play, please. I'm going to jump forward a minute. So stakeholder, pause for a second, sorry. Stakeholder collaboration is really important, and along with lots of physical people doing things in and around the space, there's also the framework that's been worked on over the last couple of years around a national approach to soft plastics with the AFGC and the formation of the NPRS, and there was an announcement in early May of a new body becoming involved in that, and we're encouraged by that level of stakeholder engagement, because it's really important not just that we can recycle it, that we can message back with people who place this material on market what is better to be recovered, and also that there is a scheme that's set up that is well funded or adequately funded. CDS has worked incredibly well in the states and territories for rigid, our water bottles and our Coca-Cola bottles and whatnot. There's no reason why that same approach can't work on a national level. Play, please. So during COVID, we built a demonstration plant to demonstrate what's possible. The video you're watching here is our demonstration plant we built on the Central Coast about 3 years ago, and evolved the process to be able to separate the different types of plastics to make a high-grade polyethylene plastic. It went through our washing plant here in Australia. We also exported to World's Best Technologies the recovered PCR product.
We will definitely get a good quality, and I also do not expect a lot of contamination which has to be filtered out.
That material was turned into a pellet and subsequently blown into a film and made into a product, the prototype of the next generation of recovery bag, made from 70% recycled content, recovered here in Australia and sorted here in Australia. Pause. So from left to right, a recovery bag system coming through a spec that we're concentrating on three main fractions: a clear and white top polyethylene fraction, a coloured polyethylene fraction. Both of those products can be used in today's mechanical washing and pelletising equipment, and is an incredibly clean feedstock for the advanced and chemical technologies that are over the horizon. The bottom fraction, the 40-odd%, is that mixed multi-laminate material, your chip packets and whatnot, which is a little bit more problematic. And the bottom 5% is, we call it the residual at the moment. There is essentially that stuff will go to landfill. It's incorrect material, PVDC, PVC, the chlorine elements get ejected, and over the horizon, we've got the ability, we bunkerise that, that as technologies improve, hopefully we'll be able to divert that 5% of the product. The bottom portion is really, really good for moulding, so for fence posts and making little plastic widgets that go behind bumper bars and stabilised plastic moulding. So that's being done right here, right now. The referred to in Shed B, the 25% is a coloured polyethylene. Again, can be used for your builders' tarps, is a high quality polyethylene sort of product. And then the top fraction there, that's the fraction that we created pellets here in Australia and sent overseas for trialling with world best technologies to produce that 70% recycled content film. And then coming back to the community, as new packaging is placed on market, they recover their soft plastics back into the curbside bin, and that whole process starts again. Play, please. Just pause. Last year in September, October, we made a decision to move forward with a facility in Taree. We've been working on this site for about 3 years, but to decommission our spec demo plant and build the country's first at-scale soft plastic engineered commodity sorting plant. Work is underway as we're sitting here right now. We intend to start factory commissioning in the next 7 to 10 days. It'll be located in the far top right building, and knock on wood, we'll have a start annual tonnes to do very, very complex sorting of somewhere between 10 and 15,000 tonnes of post-consumer soft plastic in that building. The unique opportunity about this site in Taree, about 2 hours south of here and 3 hours north of Sydney, is that precinct there, or we're calling it a circular recycling and manufacturing hub. We're taking the top right-hand corner there, has a live rail intermodal. So this site is connected to every state and territory in the country to be able to bring in recovered resources, but more importantly, as industry gets established here, to be able to take back finished product and ship that around the country and also to port, hopefully as an export. Press play. Just pause there for a second. So the B shed is the shed that we are commissioning. As I said, in the next 7 to 10 days. We're in discussions with collaborative partners about establishing processes in other buildings. There's a rail intermodal there, there's a rail spur that's on the national freight line. It's about 8 minutes off the M1 and not very far from Taree Airport. So it's a great place to, I think, start to remake in this country. New recycling industry, which is leading to jobs and playing a small role in transitioning a waste into a resource and product. Play, please. A bit of an overview at the moment. So in that shed C, there's going to be an entity set up there that will be able to produce fence posts at scale and moulded big items. In shed A, there's a different type of technology. I can't put it up at the moment, but that can take a feedstock of an output from the spec shed or shed B. There's agglomeration material in shed B. So we're bringing in a recovered resource, lowest carbon footprint being collected at the moment via the curbside trucks. It's been transformed into individual polymers and hopefully be able to be shot into another shed to be made back into something. So press play, please. Again, collaboration. A bit of a vision is that we would like to work with other stakeholders in industry to build this park out. It's just a conceptual 2030 master plan that we're working through that can enable other, not just soft plastic, but other industry potentially to establish at this precinct, having access to big sheds, big power and rail and ready to go now. Press play. That's it. A big thank you to the team at iQRenew. The journey that we started 5 odd years ago came about because of the amount of soft plastic waste that was in our material recovery facility. We were sending $2 or $3 million worth of material to landfill, and we thought that there was an opportunity there to meet an unmet demand. And I feel very privileged to be working with a very engaged team from our sorters through to our forklift operators and our senior management team that have bought in and engaged for the fact that they're actually playing a role in transforming. A byproduct of harvesting the soft plastic at our material recovery facility through a tagged bag was an improvement to all the other commodity streams too. So our fibre is some of the cleanest MRF fibre in the country. Our mixed rigid plastics has improved significantly since meeting that unmet demand for our residents. And has enabled us to have some volume of material to advance or develop this piece of infrastructure that, as Australian, and we look forward to collaborating with other industry and playing our part. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Danny. And if you've got any questions for Danny, we'll keep some time for questions at the end. Next up, we've got Liam O'Keefe. He's Head of Stewardship at the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation. He'll be presenting on extended producer responsibility for expanded polystyrene.
Great, thank you very much. Some of you might have been expecting Andrea from Lysella. Sorry to disappoint you. There's been a change in plan, so I'll be presenting today on expanded polystyrene, extended producer responsibility. And I thank Danny as well. I think he's articulated some of the challenges and the rationale as to why you need referencing extended producer responsibility, the fact that you need to be able to finance resource recovery for problematic materials. And that's kind of a theme we'll be expanding today, is really the fact that when it comes to problematic materials like plastics, soft plastics are within the MRF waste stream, but expanded polystyrene, as we all know, is an extremely problematic material. So in order to overcome if you're going to have a license to use it, then you need to contribute financially to the collection and recovery of that so that it can be utilised for positive outcomes. And that's the essence of what we're putting forward here today, that APCO is facilitating an industry-led initiative to establish extended producer responsibility for expanded polystyrene to assist in the collection and recovery of that. So that's what we'll be talking about. And we're developing an options paper to that effect in collaboration with industry, which will set out some of the stewardship and extended producer responsibility options that can be implemented going forward, and the outcomes that can achieve. And we're commencing this process. We've talked extensively with industry in terms of EPSA, EPS Australia, Christian, who we have at the back here from Waste Pro as well, but also so service providers, but also importers of EPS, who would be the primary contributors financially to the collection and recovery of that. Brands like Electrolux, Consumer Electronic Suppliers Association, who we're engaging with. We seek to bring a discussion paper together, facilitate a conversation, and put forward options for extended producer responsibility. So we'll cover today is how we've got here, what changes are coming in terms of the regulation, what's happening now with EPS management, and product stewardship options for EPS. So how we got here a lot of activity is primarily focused on the B2C elements of EPS. We have the national plastics plan. EPS has been on the Minister's priority list. There was an APCO roadmap for the national phase-out of B2C EPS packaging. And there's also state and territory single-use plastic bans, which has been great in driving activity for industry to remove EPS from their packaging where possible. But what we're doing is extending upon that. I think what we've seen is that the roadmap creates a voluntary framework to phase out EPS, but regardless of what you phase out, there is still, according to industry, essential uses for expanded polystyrene. So if you're going to continue to put it on market, then there is a requirement to manage that once it reaches end of life. The phase-outs, the voluntary phase-outs, relate primarily to groups 1 and 2 here with consumer EPS. Well, it relates to all of these, but the categories where it is possible to eliminate EPS on a relatively simple and easy scale relate to consumer EPS for immediate phase out is in consumer packaging there, number one. Moulded EPS in smaller goods under 45 kilograms. But when it comes to larger consumer goods where, televisions and computers, unfortunately, there's not materials that can perform to the same degree as EPS. If you replace it with cardboard, and unfortunately, if those containers are being shipped, the cardboard can be compromised and collapse, which creates OH&S issues. Also, it can detrimentally impact the materials or the goods with which in that packaging, which is the purpose of packaging, is to protect the goods. You have damaged televisions, you have damaged fridges, which creates another environmental problem. So until there's an alternative for it that has the parameters or the performance characteristics. What did I do then? Okay, yep. We will need to be implementing packaging stewardship scheme options for those materials while it's placed on market. And also the other elements that we need to look at are the fact that regulations are changing. There's new national Australian government regulations. We're looking at how packaging is designed from the federal government, setting minimum recycled content requirements and prohibiting harmful chemicals being used on the market. And there's a timeline for the implementation of that, with the federal government undertaking consultation and implementing a legislative process. But that's not likely to land until 25, 26. So in the meantime, we need to get active. We need to organise. You can't just sit there and wait for government to regulate. You need to work as an industry to be ready and to be able to have the most agile and specific response relative to what the material challenge might be. So I think what we can assume is that you're going to have to recover high volumes of EPS. So you will need to have a stewardship scheme. You'll need to have extended producer responsibility. You'll need to reach potentially recycled content requirements. So that's the purpose of this discussion paper, is to anticipate that there will be change coming and we need to be ready for that as an industry. Current EPS packaging material flows, the main numbers there's around, what I will say is it's very difficult to determine how much EPS packaging is placed on market as opposed to soft plastics and other materials which are manufactured locally. Or the majority of materials, televisions, computers, consumer goods are imported, and medical, furniture. It's incredibly difficult to quantify the volumes. You have to look at around 1,300 HS codes for imports to be able to understand that. So but we do know how much EPS is manufactured in Australia. So there's around 30,000 tonnes, 29,000 tonnes of packaging that's placed on market, EPS, and we're only referring to packaging here. We're not referring to other uses of EPS, which is around infrastructure, waffle pods, etc. This is packaging which is focused on for EPR. The kind of highlight there in terms of the numbers is that around 21,000 tonnes is unaccounted for. We don't know where it goes once it enters the market. So there's a lot of work to be done to ascertain where that goes and how that can be managed. And the issue with EPS, when it is placed on market, it's lightweight, highly visible, and it breaks easily. It's not currently collected through curbside, and it's really expensive to collect up because it's 97% air. So there are a lot of challenges with it. Also the recycling rate is quite low at around 30%. As I said before, with a number of tonnage of 20,000 tonnes, 70% unaccounted for. Although these numbers do need to be worked on, and we're working with industry to decipher that volume to a greater degree. But while I've just initially identified what some of the challenges are, I think what we can say is that we're not starting from scratch here. What is working with EPS currently? There's an organisation called Styrene, which is an extension of EPS Australia. It's kind of local manufacturers. The way EPS is manufactured locally is to import the resin and manufacture for, as I said, civil infrastructure, housing, etc. And at those manufacturing plants, they have drop-off centres where consumers can go and drop off their EPS, where it will be recycled and can be reused, manufactured into infrastructure purposes. Also, as I mentioned, Christian is here from Foam Muncher, who has a stall outside. there's a mobile phone munching system which already provides services to councils. And we also, which is quite an innovative approach in terms of moving the facility around to overcome the transport and logistics issues which are associated with EPS, where, as I said, you would be transporting 97% air. If you can move the solution to where the problem is, that's an excellent efficiency in terms of creating solutions. So, there's also reverse logistics solutions and Polyfoam Australia Light and Easy kind of in-house kind of B2B collections. So the point is, there are solutions there, but as we articulated with Danny, is it's the commercial gaps, right? You need to be able to fund it, and that's where extended producer responsibility comes into play. So there's great opportunities for EPS management. The other kind of key point from this is it's a single polymer, so it doesn't have the challenges of soft plastic in terms of the multi-polymer elements. If you can get it and collect it and process it, you can use it, and that's a great solution. And there's markets for it, both locally and overseas. A lot of the EPS kind of sausages is compressed and heated, exported for the remanufacture predominantly in Asia, but currently around picture frames and other kind of ornis. What's the word? Those things. And so there is attributes to be built upon to enhance and create a system. So what we've been looking at is to say, rightio, if you are placing on market, you have that responsibility to look after it once it reaches end of life. If it's going to be used persistently for these applications, we want to look at, we're developing the discussion paper to talk about how these issues can be resolved through effective stewardship, and just to ensure a long-term plan to comply with regulations and keep EPS out of the environment. There's 4 options, which I'll focus on the first 3. There's a business as usual approach, which is do nothing, which isn't really an option, I don't think. But you've got to put it there, particularly to those that say, I don't want to do it. And we say, well, if you don't want to do it, this is what happens. So you need the business as usual proposition there to kind of compel activity. There's voluntary participation, there's mandatory participation. I'll quickly go through these. So, business as usual is you do nothing. Basically, it's not really as much of an option, as I said, but there's no fees, but the issue is that industry doesn't have a license to operate. Regulations will come and you will be forced to do something anyway, and it will probably be more of an onerous and more compelling that might otherwise have been the case had you taken action and been able to determine in a more articulate manner what the most effective regulatory implementation should be. That's probably the kind of the main factors is that you would be exposed to the regulations. Probably the next step or up in terms of implementing a stewardship scheme would be voluntary participation in a stewardship scheme, which would work as follows here. Probably the main things to point out is if you do a voluntary scheme, what you would have is kind of the leaders, the exposed brands, which might represent a portion of the market, who might contribute voluntarily, basically predicated upon the material that they place on market to pay for their own kind of commercial responsibility, which, given the challenges with the volume that's imported into Australia, wouldn't be commensurate to the full challenge of solving this problem on a national level. So what you would get would be limited funding from leader brands, and retailers, JBs, and those types of guys that would fund the collection and recovery, likely for what they place on market, which is great, and it needs to happen. But unfortunately, what you would get is probably the low-hanging fruit in terms of collection options in urban and areas where there's a more of a critical mass of supply, and you can then collect and recover there. The downside would be for regional areas, places like Northern Territory, Western Australia, other areas wouldn't get the full comprehensive coverage that they might require on a voluntary basis. So it's the free rider element, which is the downside, is basically you would get brands that aren't contributing financially who benefit from that scheme and aren't contributing to the solution, who put that material on market. So, but what I would say is voluntary can often be a good precursor, an initial first step to bring brands together to work collaboratively and understand what the solutions is to be able to inform regulation at a later date. I think I've covered this reasonably well, but the pros, there are some pros to voluntaries in that it's flexible, fee structure. You can collect and process amounts of EPS, but it's limited in volumes. And you're not there's no requirement from an external agent that keeps vigilance on the scheme, which can create inefficiencies, extra costs and the like. But the cost, as I said, is the free riders. The scheme would be underfunded, and it wouldn't have the coverage that otherwise you would seek from a regulated scheme. I think the main option that would be looked at is the mandatory option via regulations. And as I articulated at the outset, we know that the federal government is regulating, that there is a timeline for 2026. So I think the smart positioning would be get on the front foot, industry, do something in a voluntary context that would lead and transition to what would be a likely regulatory implications at a later date. The benefit of a regulated scheme is basically you get the free riders in. So as I mentioned, EPS packaging is predominantly come in from goods that are imported from Asia and other manufacturing countries. And through a regulated scheme, you'd be able to monitor that import to be able to require those brand owners to pay for the collection and recovery and processing of that material within Australia. You just get more money, you get the free riders in. You don't have the leaders at a cost disadvantage. For instance, if it's $2, $3, $4, $5, whatever the cost might be for the EPS on a fridge, that can be a disincentive for some to, when margins are fine, brands can leave. So a regulatory mechanism is really important in that context. The pros there that everybody contributes. The scheme is funded. You can, if everybody's in and everybody's paying, it can be a universal, a whole of Australia scheme that meets the needs of the regional and remote communities as well, and not just people within urban areas. And it can hit higher targets and also probably be more more vigilance and requirements in terms of performance. But one thing that can be a bit of a burden with centralised, with centralised schemes and from that are regulated is they can be quite onerous in terms of having a central PRO, which is a producer responsibility organisation, which can require, anointed by government or appointed by government, they can set the fee structures and be determinant as to how that scheme operates. And the reporting, the auditing, the kind of external vigilance can be quite extensive. And the final point is that if EPS is regulated and other materials aren't, and you're putting a cost impost on that EPS, it can be at a disadvantage to other packaging materials. But at the same time, potentially that might, if EPS is problematic, kind of brand owners might look for alternative packaging types if there's a cost impost on that type of material. So that can be an advantage in terms of incentivising the elimination of that material if that's an objective of the scheme. So the next steps in terms, as I articulated at the outset, that we're going through a process of bringing together a discussion paper. We're looking at the data. We're consulting with industry. We seek feedback from councils, local government, others, because we know that there's great exposure from local government and the like to the burdens of the management of EPS. So this discussion paper we're seeking, we will go to finalise that in July, put it out for comment, seek feedback, and then the intent is to establish the nucleus of a stewardship scheme in 2025. So we're anticipating the kind of regulatory context which is likely to be prevalent within around 26, 27. That's it.
Thanks, Liam. Next up, we've got Shaun Devine from Principal Consultant with MRA Consulting Group, presenting to us on the Global Plastics Treaty.
To a respectable height. All right, hello everyone. My name is Shaun Devine. and I'll be presenting this presentation on behalf of Shannon Mead, who is the Executive Director of No More Butts. He was originally going to do this. Unfortunately, he's at a conference in the States. So he delegated to my colleague, Sam Swain, who is a recent addition to his board, who also couldn't make it. So third time lucky, you've got me. So I thought I'd give you a quick background on No More Butts. No More Butts is a registered environmental charity taking action on cigarette butt, litter, and vaping waste. They're relatively new, only 4 years old, and they advocate for change in Australia, and they are also an accredited observer at the United Nations program. Shannon has been following the plastics treaty process over the past year and was lucky enough to be in Ottawa, Canada last month. I'd encourage you to keep up to date with No More Butts by clicking on that link, following the QR code, and just having a look at their website. You can follow what they're doing in plastic treaty, or how they're following the plastic treaty, what they're doing on vaping waste, and just the policies behind it all. So to start off, maybe by a show of hands, who has heard about the Global Plastics Treaty? All right, good. And who has been following it on a regular basis? All right, excellent. So a little less of you. So the point of today is to fill you in on some of the gaps that you may have. So the Global Plastic Treaty came about after a resolution from the United Nations Environmental Assembly's meeting, which was held in March 2022. The resolution was adopted to develop a legally binding instruction, and then instruction is the same as an agreement or a contract. And this instruction was on plastic pollution, which includes marine pollution, includes the marine environment. As noted at that resolution, it could include voluntary or mandatory approaches across the life cycle of plastic. So representatives from all United Nations member countries have come together now 4 times, with the most recent one taking place in Ottawa at the end of April. So that's only 2 weeks ago. So this is fresh off hot off the press sort of news. At the meetings are negotiations. The committee is formed by the representatives from the member states, and they're called an Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, or INC for short. Every time they meet, they put a number behind it, so that was INC 4, and so on and so on. So now I don't think I need to tell the people in the room how important it is to have an international approach to plastic pollution. Not only are there alarming statistics on the amount of plastic waste that ends up in our marine environment on a daily and annual basis, but this waste is also mismanaged, poorly mismanaged, and it's the litter that we're all too familiar with whenever we go out on the water. Specifically for cigarette butts, 4.5 trillion butts are littered every year around the world, with an estimated 8.9 billion littered here in Australia annually, which is a staggering amount. So regardless of your stance, whether you think upstream or downstream measures should be the focus, I think we can all agree that something needs to be done. So before we look at what happened at INC 4, I thought we'd highlight where Australia sits when negotiating their position in this plastics treaty. So the Minister for the Environment has openly noted that Australia has a high ambition and is a member of a group of countries with the name the High Ambition Coalition. I encourage you again to click on the QR code, and that'll take you to a webpage which will give you more information about that coalition. So in essence, this coalition wants to ensure that there is a place for upstream measures, including sustainable production of primary plastic polymers. rather than just focusing on the downstream waste generated from this plastic. So, what happened in Ottawa? Day one is called Partnerships Day. This was where hundreds of people came together to hear different views from invited delegates and dignitaries from around the world. After the plenary kickoff on day one, the working group broke up into 5 subgroups, where delegates began negotiating the text of the agreement that had been drafted in all the previous INCs. In these sessions, delegates discussed issues like product design, problematic and avoidable plastics, production, emissions and releases, waste management, financing, and a just transition. In addition to representatives from 170 member countries, nearly 500 observer organizations were present, including representatives from the fossil fuel industry. So over the 6 days of the conference, which was the end of April, there was some progress attempting to negotiate some sections of the draft agreement that had been prepared previously. However, there was quite a lot of blocking from some countries when topics such as production of plastics was addressed. And like any good UN meeting, there's a lot of talking at the beginning, and they saved all the juicy bit for the very, very, very end. So specifically about 3 a.m. in the morning, a position was finally reached, which saw the committee agree to move forward with work before the next session. So what they decided is one group will focus on the means of implementation of the final agreement, including the financial model for such an agreement. And then the other group would focus on identifying criteria for plastic products and design, including things like the ability for products to be reused and recycled. This was the most contentious point, with most member countries wanting to have work in this space. But what about the elephant in the room? It was very clear that the elephant in the room was plastic pollution. A group of countries, including many that produce and consume oil and fossil fuels, have formed their own coalition. And after going by a number of different names, they've finally settled on the like-minded group. And membership seems to be fluid on some topics, but pretty resolute when it comes to the debating the inclusion of targeting a reduction of primary plastic polymers in this agreement. So I guess the rest of the members refer to this group as the Low Ambition Coalition, as their efforts are more focused on recycling and waste management, so the downstream aspects of plastic rather than the upstream prevention redesign. And it was reported that some of these countries were heavily engaged with representatives from the fossil fuel industry throughout the meetings as well, so probably no surprise there. So I hope you now understand a little bit of what the treaty is and what happened at INC 4, and I'm just going to delve into a little bit of what will happen next now. So on the final day of the meeting, the bridge to Busan was released. And for those of you that don't know, Busan is a city in South Korea, and that's where the next INC 4 is going to be held in November this year, so not too far away. Again, please follow that QR code link there. It takes you to a web-based website where countries that believe the treaty should include sustainable production targets for plastic polymers can sign up. This is where you go sign up your interest. Australia has joined over 30 other countries in voicing this view, even though on the last day they did concede to move discussions forward without including this topic. So if you are an NGO, you can add your voice to this as well. So I really do encourage NGOs to sign up. What if you're not an NGO? Well, if you're a local government, you may also be wondering how you can get involved in this process, or at least keep up to date with what's happening. So also launched at the Partnership Day at the INC4 was the Local and Sub-Regional Government Coalition. Several councils from around the world have signed up to have their views expressed and represented at the INCs, and that QR code will take you to where you as a council can sign up as well. So now, what about butts? That's the big question. What about butts? How does that fit into all of this? Cigarette butts, or tobacco and cigarette filters before they are actually smoked, are made of plastic. And I assume most of you knew that, but if you didn't, light bulb moment. It's just another single-use plastic. And in fact, there's been some growing evidence in the past couple of years that not only are they the most littered item in the world, but these plastic filters actually don't provide any benefit to human health, which is very, very interesting. They're more of just the science shows that it's just something to hold on to and give the illusion that they are doing something. So this is the reason why No More Butts was formed and why they are following and involved in the whole INC process. So at INC4, in addition to No More Butts and some other tobacco control groups, the World Health Organization also reinforced their earlier call for cigarette filters to be banned as part of the treaty. And it's good to know that momentum in this space is growing. From all corners of the globe, at INC3, Palau had called for a ban at INC3. This conference, Panama and Peru also called for a ban on the filters. And Switzerland as well has highlighted that cigarette butts will be included as a criteria for single-use plastics in the working of the treaty. In fact, Thailand, Rwanda, and Georgia have also supported this position in a joint submission. So overall, we now have 7 countries and the World Health Organization specifically calling for a ban on plastic cigarette filters at an international level. So to sum up, the INC will meet again later this year to advance negotiations into a final text. It remains to be seen whether it will require a consensus to be adopted or if some countries can vote. It is also unclear whether it will be mandatory or some provisions will be voluntary. And it remains to be seen if the elephant will be addressed and if there will be a debate on the inclusion of limits on plastic generation in the future. However, it seems that some provisions will have an agreement, and it's more than likely that a formal agreement will be put in place around plastic products and waste management. But I encourage you, while all this takes place in the background, I really encourage everyone in this room, from state, local, federal government, to continue on with their policy implementation, especially focusing on harmonization across the states, rather than waiting for a potential agreement at an international level. Thank you very much. I hope you've all sort of been clued up and brought up to speed on the Plastics Treaty and what's happening over the next 6 months. I'm happy to take questions. I'll answer them if I can. If not, I will get No More Butts to get hold of you. And please follow them, see what they're doing. It's a great gateway to regular information. Thanks very much.
I'll just move this back down to an unrespectable level, thanks. Thank you, Shaun. Next up, we've got Rebecca Prince-Ruiz, Executive Director of the Plastic Free Foundation. She's going to solve our disposable coffee cup problem. Thanks.
Well, I don't know if I'll solve it, but I've got lots of ideas and happy to give it a crack. Thanks, Shaun. That was a really great segue, and I think it kind of helps to frame the disposable coffee cup issue, which is our number one single-use plastic item now used here in Australia. And just to add to what you said about the Global Plastics Treaty, I think that but the work that is happening in the community, the work that's happening with NGOs, with local governments, within the waste industry, I think is really the backbone of of why our government has joined this high ambition coalition, and we're really, what I've seen since I've been working on this issue for the last 15 years is it's really that this groundswell of community change and what's happening at a grassroots level and the bottom up is actually driving business and also government change. As was mentioned, I'm from the Plastic Free Foundation. We're an NGO helping people and organisations take action to reduce plastic waste, and we since 2011 started and run the what is now a global campaign, Plastic Free July, which just helps people reduce and refuse single-use plastics. And before I kind of get into the coffee cup, I just wanted to share a little bit of research that we did with WWF ahead of the global, the most recent round of the Global Plastics Treaty negotiations. And I think it's really important to, I think the plastic issue gets a lot of attention because of the pollution problem. And a lot of the regulations and measures that we've seen in this country to tackle the plastics issue, such as banning lightweight plastic bags, straws and other single-use plastic items, introduction of container deposit schemes, is really as a result of this litter issue. It's visual, it's public. There's no denying the source of this plastic pollution issue. Everyone except Andrew Bolt, I don't know where he thinks it's coming from, but he doesn't think it's from human source. But and I think a lot of those measures that we have introduced have CSIRO is measuring the reduction in plastic litter on our beaches, so we know it's having an effect. But there's the plastic litter issue, and I'm not saying anything to anyone in this room that you don't know, but those measures which are driving reduction in litter aren't always the measures that we need to tackle the bigger issues of our overall waste that we're generating and our unsustainable extraction of resources and production and consumption. And it's those issues that are driving the triple planetary crisis of pollution, loss of biodiversity and the climate emergency. So in this recent, we've been doing polling with Ipsos and WWF globally since UNEA 5.2 when the treaty was announced, and it's been interesting we've just released the third round of global polling. They surveyed around 30,000 people, I think it was, in 32 different countries. Maybe it was 26,000 people in 32 countries. And people's understanding of this pollution and the waste issues is certainly growing, and whilst I don't think everyone is there in terms of our understanding of the circular economy, I think we're all coming to that bans aren't going to get us out of this issue. And one of the questions that we asked for the first time in the most recent survey is around what those global rules in that instrument of a legally binding treaty might be. And we did ask about reuse and refill for the first time, and it was really interesting and pleasing to see that 87% of Australians believe we should have global rules requiring manufacturers and retailers to provide reuse and refill systems. And adding to what you said, Shaun, about the local government coalition, there's also a business coalition of global businesses that are supporting the Global Plastics Treaty. Those members from the waste industry, finance, producers and manufacturers. There's no Australian businesses that have added their name yet, so that's just a little shout out that we can be involved in that process in different ways. But back to the coffee cup, I think that the single-use disposable takeaway coffee cup has become the symbol really of the throwaway society that we have become. I looked up some stats for this talk: 34,000 cafes, 54,000 cafes and restaurants, who knows how many food trucks, 1.8 billion single-use cups used in this country each year. And when we start to think about where those, that's a lot of cafes, where those cafes are, where people are purchasing, and then where they're going to actually consume them, buying them on their way to work, coming home from the gym, out and about with friends. I saw the one cafe truck down at the beach near my hotel this morning. When you start to multiply that these figures in terms of the number of cafes and the number of cups, and then you think about the number of bins that they're going to end up with, I'd hate to think how many hundreds of thousands of bins that they're ending up in. Unlike some other beverage packaging, like the eligible beverage containers in CDS, there's not a strong market for end market for these products. Just want to give you an example, I think, of just how much of a national problem that we have here. We did an event last June at Parliament House in Canberra, and one of the MPs asked a question and got the numbers there. So this is in Parliament House, there's two different cafes and coffee carts, two different businesses, and this is the one run by PMC, and so they used, this was just 11 months, 282,420 takeaway coffee cups, and they can tell in their POS, because they mark whether that's one of their single-use cups or people have brought a reusable cup. Every MP and senator has dishwashing facilities. As you can see, particularly for those of you down the front, they love branded cups in that place. Like, they all have branded cups, they all have dishwashing facilities, and yet 250,000 cups from one cafe were single use. In budget week last year, and I have no reason to expect this week would be any different, 9,000 single-use cups. This is a closed loop system. It's really, there's reusables, more than enough reusables in that building, and they have a disposable problem. And it's not just obviously in Australia now, we're not really seeing any foam cups. They're typically paper lined with plastic and plastic lids. So it's not just the 250,000 cups, it's the 831 kilos of plastic, the 5,500 plus kilos of paper, and the embodied energy used in producing those cups. So we've done a bit of work at Plastic Free July. We do a lot of research in terms of trying to understand consumer behaviour, understand who's buying coffee, who's buying it in the single-use cups, what are their challenges, what are their barriers, and by understanding behaviour, where people are at, what's where they're going to when they're purchasing cups, we can help support communities to start to make transitions to reuse. And I think this is really one of those problems that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution for. I think it's going to take lots of different solutions that need to be supported by good policy change. So what really surprised me in this research, and it was a representative survey across ages and demographics of 990 Australian adults, it just surprised me how many people in this country drink coffee. 88% of adults buy coffee from cafes, 74% of adults always use takeaways, but there's only a very small percentage, so 9% of Australian adults or 10% of cafe coffee drinkers are always managing to avoid single-use cups. So there's a lot of scope for behaviour change. The behaviours around single-use cups and BYI cups are surprising. So one of the questions we asked this independent research company to ask was, are these cafe coffee drinkers, was, do you own a reusable cup? I thought it might be like 50%. It was 100%. 100% of people in our survey, which is representative, buying takeaway coffees own a reusable cup. And in a way that's not surprising. You look out there and how many stalls are giving away a branded cup. In our house, we now have not only a ban on reusable bags, but we have a ban on reusable cups because we have enough. So, we could, in theory, ban single-use cups tomorrow and we could all still drink coffee, but we're a little way off that yet. So in terms of where the areas that we can start to target, encouraging people to bring their own reusables or implement one of the many forms of cup exchange schemes that are now emerging or being created or on the market, we find typically that it's young people, 18 to 34-year-olds, full-time working adults, CBD workers, and lower income people from lower income houses are the demographics that are favouring these schemes. It's interesting when you look at the demographics with the lowest uptake. It's people out of work or retired, students and higher income earners. They're really interesting. For me, the most interesting statistic that we learnt with this piece of research was how people felt about it. So 83% of adults didn't feel good about choosing a single-use cup. And I think this is something that's really important, particularly for the waste educators in the room. And this was a really hard lesson for me to learn myself, is like, well, if someone's doing a behaviour that we're trying to change and they're not doing the behaviour, we think it's because they don't understand, so we just give them more and more information. Whereas this is clear that no one feels good, very few people feel good about using a single-use cup. They might have forgotten, they might have been not planning to buy a cafe, it might have been dirty sitting on their desk, or they just forgot. So with that in mind, this kind of research really helps us to inform behaviour. So as we started to work on helping people and organisations reduce their use of single-use cups, we started to look at other jurisdictions and what they are doing to transition. And I think we do need to consider this as a transition to a circular economy, not just tackling a litter item. And I'm going to give you some examples from Western Australia, where I live, of the impacts that we're seeing on the policy changes that have happened there. I won't go through this in detail because a lot of these examples of good policies and what's being done in other countries have been mentioned in other talks over the last few days. On our website, we've got a paper on disposable coffee cups and policy interventions, which is on our website, so the link that's into it there. But I think, needless to say, one of the most important aspects of good policy change is around this issue is not just bans, but actually including reuse targets. And what the research is showing is that interventions to decrease disposables and increase reusables, some of the most effective options are not just an incentive for reusables, like the 50 cents if you bring your own cup, but actually a disincentive for single use. So in places like in Berkeley, in California, they've introduced a ban on using single-use cups for dine-in in locations with dishwashing facilities, as well as a 25-cent fee for a single-use cup. And I don't know if Tony from the EPA would call that a carrot-flavoured stick or just a plain old stick, but that's the kind of legislation that we're seeing. And I think that the reuse targets is something that's really important as well. So as I said, I live in Western Australia, and last month, or March, our state government introduced a ban on single-use cups that are lined with plastic and have plastic lids. Just a quick, not-so-fun fact for those of you who don't know, most of the plastic lids are actually compressed polystyrene. Styrene is not a very nice chemical, so if you do ever use a single-use cup, please don't drink through the lid. That human health issue is another whole thing. So we've banned single-use coffee cups lined with plastics and plastic lids. What we're seeing, and look, I don't have any numbers. I don't know if the department has any numbers or what the monitoring that they're doing, but anecdotally, we're not seeing any shift to reuse. We're seeing just a transition to compostable cups without any collection and processing facilities. Some of them, and look, this is actually, I couldn't find the photo that I'd taken, so I've just ripped this one from the internet, but a lot of them actually say, yes, I'm plastic free. And I also sit on the board of the West Australian Container Deposit Scheme. We are really working to encourage collection and donations of eligible beverage containers in public places. The coffee cup is the number one contaminant of our CDS bins. It's the number one contaminant in recycling bins. People genuinely think that because it's paper, it's fine to use, not really realising that it's just using of resources that could be saved by just bringing their own reusable or choosing to dine in. So they're recycling our CDS bins, they're contaminating our CDS bins, they're contaminating our recycling bins. We now have a new symbol in Western Australia, which is no single-use coffee cup, and they're pretty much in every bin except the landfill bin. So for jurisdictions thinking about introducing policies to tackle single-use coffee cups, I really encourage you to have a think about these issues. And look, you know, it's tricky because if you're thinking from a litter perspective, it is better to have a compostable cup as litter than a single-use cup. When you're thinking about it from a resource perspective, from a circular economy perspective, I think that we can and need to do better. So the kind of work that we've been doing is encouraging, we kind of synthesised it down to bring, borrow, stay, bring your own cup, borrow or swap one from a cup exchange schemes, or just sit and stay and take 5 minutes there. We've created a whole toolkit of resources to help and remind community members, prompts and collateral for cafes, sharing positive stories of what cafes are doing, as well as engaging with a number of businesses and encouraging them to make changes to help employees make a difference. And so this is some of the resources that can be used at cafes or on workplace notice boards, etc., that are all available on our Plastic Free July website. As I mentioned before, people know about this issue, they care about this issue, they feel guilty when they don't get it right, and so the focus of our work through Plastic Free July, through our engagement with businesses, through our local government members, is really sharing and focusing on solutions and celebrating solutions. So it's really great to see the rise of change there. Sure, many of you will have seen Sondi and her takeaway only cafe in North Bondi that has gone single-use cup free. She did it as a 1-week challenge for Plastic Free July 1 year, and then now that's a permanent thing. Macquarie Bank introduced the Circle in Sydney, the Circle Cup Exchange initiative, saving 5,000 cups in 1 month. Some workplaces set up their own mug library. This photo on the bottom right there was a hospital in Adelaide. Some of their staff got involved and they decided they were going to tackle the single-use cup issue. They got some donated mugs and encouraged their staff to take part. And, you know, we're also, some workplaces go high end and get a system like Returner in their offices. There's different solutions that fit different situations. And I was asking the cafe owner down at the beach here this morning what the single-use cups actually cost him, and he said about 40 to 50 cents per unit. So it is an impost on businesses as well, and some businesses are starting to flip and charging for single-use cups, so it's a flat price if you're using one of their cups or dining in. The other thing we're doing is just trying to promote some leadership on this issue as well. We often talk to staff or in local government and in businesses that are working really hard to educate the community and residents, and then it's an issue within the organisation. So last year we worked with our member councils, mayors, MPs, CEOs of businesses. Steve is the CEO of Endeavour Group, one of Australia's largest bricks and mortars. So they were all taking the challenge and making a pledge. We're starting to see changes in behaviour at a population scale. It's starting. We are seeing a shift in this country. So it's really, if you're thinking about, what to tackle next, we are having an impact there. As I said, there's lots of different solutions. We need diversity. We need circular outcomes. We need to help people. We need to make it easy, and we need to actually get those policy levers right to support reuse at scale. July is a really great time to take part. There's lots of interest from the media in tackling this issue, so please get in touch, take part, have a chat, and if we all make small steps together, then that adds up to a big difference. So thank you.
Thanks so much. That's great. We've got a good bit of time for questions. If anybody has any questions. Unfortunately, Liam has had to rush off for a flight. But if you've got questions for Danny on soft plastics, Shaun on the plastics treaty, or Rebecca on coffee cups, anybody? I'm happy to get us started if I can work out how this microphone works. Hello? Yep, good. So I'd love to start with Shaun. So in terms of cigarette butts, obviously it would be great to see an international solution for that, particularly given how strong the cigarette company lobby is. Do you think there's anything that we could be doing at a national or even a state level to start tackling the cigarette butt issue?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's an issue that's been around for, I don't know, 50 years or whatever. They started manufacturing cigarettes with built-in filters. Yeah, look, besides, I suppose, behavior change, where a lot more smokers, well, first of all, smoking is slowly decreasing, but those smokers that remain are moving towards loose tobacco and rolling their own cigarettes. So it's possibly just promoting that as the worst case scenario, stopping smoking as the best case scenario. But as smoking decreases and vaping is increasing, which brings its own waste types as well. So, you know, you can argue that we're getting rid of one evil and replacing with something even worse, which a vape is. Look, No More Butts is the advocacy group for reducing cigarette butts and just the waste that goes with it. So they're really the ones who are pushing this agenda. But no, I don't have any silver bullet, unfortunately.
Mike Ritchie, MRA Consulting. Just on that point, many of you may know or may not know the federal government has national environment protection measures which have never been used in this country, which give the federal government capacity to actually regulate things like cigarette butts. So I don't think it's a lack of machinery, it's a lack of will, as it is with many and most of the recycling challenges in Australia. It's a lack of will. So that's where things like the coffee cup program are so good in terms of motivating public views, which eventually, when we're all old and retired, will have an effect on politicians. And what we've got to do is accelerate that rate of change. I wanted to ask the question to Rebecca on that point. Is there any advocacy for a coffee cup extended producer responsibility or product stewardship responsibility made mandatory? And just before I hand over, we've just done an analysis of the product stewardship schemes in Australia based on work done by the Institute of Sustainable Futures. And of the compulsory schemes in Australia have got above 60% capture rate of what's going into, so that's container deposits, oil, stuff like that. The voluntary schemes are between 1 and 16%. So clearly we need a mandatory scheme for product stewardship for coffee cups. So where's the advocacy for that, and can you tell us what's happening?
It's a good point, Mike. So I'm not aware of any advocacy in that space. My question on it, and I think it's a good point. My question is what is the end market for that material? I know with CDS, like liquid paperboard is an issue in terms of the end market where, we're mostly exporting that. So, yeah, where is this material going to go? Who wants it? And how can you, with literally hundreds of thousands of disposal points, how is there ever going to be a scheme that is going to be able to collect all of those, or all of that material, like realistically?
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
We've got to think about scale. We put 1.2 million tonnes of fibre through paper mills in Australia. They are the end market. There is 5,000 tonnes of coffee cups in Australia. That's it, 5,000 tonnes out of 1.2 million. Yes, there is plastic in a coffee cup and there's a lid. That is a trivial contamination rate for a paper mill. And they can recover the fibre. So the scheme needs to compensate paper mills for that deconstruction of the paper from the plastic and compensate them for the landfill disposal. The only additional cost is the collection. And of course the paper mills are going to say, we don't want your coffee cups. But as an Australian community, we need to say it's a burden that someone needs to take. The best place to put it is paper mills, and we'll compensate you and you make profit on it. It's actually relatively simple because it's such a trivial tonnage. And if we want to do it, we've got to get to it at scale. Now, the biggest challenge is, of course, collection. You're absolutely right. That is where the costs are, not in the offtake arrangements. And Save Board, turning it into building material, good on them, great, but it's very small scale. We want to do it properly, we've got to get it into the paper mills.
Good point. As I say on Q&A, we'll take that as a comment. Very good point, well made. I'll just go to...
Thank you, Richard Plant from Recycling Victoria. My question for Danny is around short and long-term storage consequences on the recoverability of soft plastics, please.
Have enough infrastructure so you don't have to store it is the simple answer to that. When this piece of infrastructure kicks off in a couple of weeks' time, then what we'll be looking for, hopefully in the near future, is feedstock to feed that piece of infrastructure. I'll go and point to an ore body, a coal mine. A coal mine will be constructed on top of an ore reserve because they know that they have the feedstock there to underpin the investment to process that coal for whatever offtake that coal goes into. We've sought to build a piece of infrastructure in regional New South Wales, well positioned between Queensland and to be able to support hopefully Brisbane and Sydney and Newcastle and surrounding areas. What we'll be looking at doing is working with lots of stakeholders, local councils, brands, to be able to ensure that we've got adequate material to feed this piece of infrastructure. With that said, the work that the NPRS is doing to make sure that we have an adequately funded scheme is as important. Liam touched on the fact, I think it was about free riders. It's everyone needs to pay their share. The CDS in the states and territories in this country has worked really, really well. And it's a revenue driver for material recovery facilities, for charities at the bulk drop-off areas. It produces a clean stream of material for processors to use. And I think the NPRS, I think a CDS-like scheme nationally is a way of making sure that we're adequately funded, making the material valuable, and therefore hopefully leading to governments mandating procurement of materials made from recycled content, which will pull through. Making it valuable through a CDS-like scheme will mean that less people will discard it, will want to participate in a bag and a bin or a return to store or a collection process. So hopefully in 6 to 12 months, certainly in this geographical area, there won't be any stockpiling or storage of soft plastics, and that we'll be able to, a small role, be looking to work with other councils to make sure that we have adequate ore feedstock to put through this piece of infrastructure. The plan in that B shed is to build a 48,000 tonne soft plastic sorting piece of kit. I know that there's several 100,000 tonnes of soft plastic packaging placed on market in this country, so it's only a small fraction. But in order to get to that scale, we need to have a really well-funded NPRS. We need to have products that the community, through local government, state and feds, can buy back. And the missing link, as I touched on there, was this piece of infrastructure, we believe, to play a role in separating that, to provide that to a post maker, to a film blower, for governments then to say, right, you've got to have 30% of your products in your materials that we procure. So hopefully no more storage and stockpiling.
Yeah, it's John from Resource Recovery Team of New South Wales EPA. I just want to add some comments about the last the speaker, which is great, very good presentation, and very lovely to see the WA government actually ban the single-use coffee cup in the dining setting. I just want to raise a concern about using the reusable cup, like the keep cup, because some of the keep cup they're made by plastics, and the whether you need to get a keep cup really depends on your coffee consumption. Because from the life cycle perspective, if you only drink, a few cups of coffee a year, it is pointless to get a reusable cup because that will cause a higher environmental impacts compared to the single-use plastic cup. Yeah, but yeah, overall, it's great to hear such insightful presentation. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm sure many of our cupboards are full of many reusable cups. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, jumping off that point, I was just thinking, I don't think it's a matter of buying more reusables because as we established, I think everyone has quite easy access to reusables. So we might as well just use them if we're talking about like life cycle analysis and the embodied emissions and kind of like offsetting that technically over time through use. But my question is for Rebecca was that you said, hold on, let me look at this statistic because there's an interesting discrepancy in it. So yeah, 100% own a reusable cup, but 74% always use takeaway single use. And I think you alluded to the fact that, within kind of a busy young population more, they might forget it or just be in a rush. But do you think it also comes down to just preferring the beverage aesthetic of single use? Because that's come up as a data point in some of my research. And I'm interested to know if it's supported by other similar studies.
I've been wondering that myself, actually. Yeah, look, I think, so this data is asking people, so the research that we did, we were asking people to describe their behaviour. It was an observational study, so it was interesting that younger demographic, when we often get a very higher levels of awareness and concern, did have that lower level of behaviour. I suspect from what I see there is an aesthetic issue. I've heard from some people that they think the drink stays hotter in a single-use cup with a lid than a reusable. But I think, for me, then that really shows that we've got to work on changing that behaviour and understanding a bit more about like what are those drivers and why and what is attractive at that, and then find some really great influences in that space to start to showing things differently. Like I remember, every time, and I don't do it very often, but watch morning TV, you're seeing people there with their, coming on with their single-use cups and celebrities with their single-use cups, and it's almost like it's become a little bit aspirational in a way. And I think, I think COVID set us back in that, and with cafes not allowing it and being a lot of confusion around whether they were allowed to serve them or not serve them. So I think, getting more of an understanding on what drives people's behaviour and then targeting interventions, I think will really help accelerate the change. And as Mike said, I think it's really that, a bit of a good public example of how that groundswell of community change then puts pressure on our governments to regulate.
that, just like that, it's lunchtime. So thank you all for your questions, and to our wonderful presenters, enjoy the rest of the conference.